We're now going to mount the brackets on the panel, on the overlay panel, so that we can then hang it on the appliance. For this step, we'll need to reference the installation manual, which has a table and dimensions for bracket placement, and this is dependent on the width of the appliance that we're working on. So Fhiaba has multiple widths, and so this table will reference all of those different dimensions that we would need. So the first step I like to do is try and orient myself. I'm working on the back of the panel. I like to know where the top and the bottom is, and the hinge side and handle side. So I'll mark basically, and we can write on the back of it without any issue because it's going to be hidden once we mount it on the appliance. So this is my top, and I'm thinking in my head it's a left hinge model. So when this panel is mounted on, this is going to be my hinge side, and this is going to be my handle side. So very important that when the point comes where we're drilling holes to mount the handle, that we're drilling them on the correct side. So the first step is going to be marking a center line on the panel. So we'll measure the hole width. The panel is 23.5 inches. If you recall, our niche opening is 23 3/4. That gives us a 1/4 inch difference, which gives us a 1/8 inch of gap on either side of the panel once we do the installation. So half of 23.5 is going to be 11 3/4. So we'll mark our midpoint at 11 3/4. Maybe we'll do another one here, and then down at the bottom as well. And then we'll just basically give ourselves a center line, because all of the dimensions for the brackets are referenced off the center line. And we do this in pencil because some parts of the panel may be exposed after we install it, and we want to be able to remove those lines so the customer doesn't see them. So there's our center line that we'll reference off of for all of our brackets. And when we're doing our measurements for the placement of the brackets, you'll notice when you look at the installation manual, it's always going to reference from the bottom of the refrigerator door panel or from the top of the drawer panel and then down. And this is because the door panel can be taller than the specified, depending on how the designer has made the cabinet, and the drawer panel can also be shorter or longer than what is specified in the manual, depending on the height of the toe kick that the designer has specified. For Series 599, which is the unit we're working on, we're going to start with our upper adjustment brackets. And so those are our B and C dimensions. Under the Series 599, it'll say hinge left or hinge right, and we always keep in mind that our hinge is left for our reference for each dimension. So our B dimension is what we're looking for our first bracket, 8 1/8 off the center line. And the other bracket will be our C dimension, which will be 4 3/8 off the center line. And anytime we're marking our bracket placement points, it's always going to be to the outside hole of the bracket. And so where to place that vertically on the panel is 50 5/8 of an inch. So measure that up from the bottom. 50 5/8. Right there, 50 5/8. And that's basically where those brackets are going to go. So now we'll go about placing the rest of the brackets. And we've referenced, and we're now looking at the D dimension, and we go up to D. Remember, we're left hinge, and it tells me it's 10 7/8 off of the center line. So I'll mark 10 7/8 off of the center line. Right there. And then the other bracket, because these are all going to be in alignment, we only need to mark the line once, or the placement once. So E dimension is now 9 3/8 off of the center line to the other side. 29 3/8. And so you notice that these are not centered off of the center line because of the placement of the actual hanger bolts on the appliance itself. So we'll draw ourselves a reference line on either side. And then we'll have 3 brackets on the left side, 3 brackets on the right side, and now we'll mark their distance from the bottom of the panel. The first one is at 6 1/4 inches. So we'll mark 6 1/4 there. And we'll mark 6 1/4 here. The second bracket goes at 26 inches. Marking there, there. And the uppermost bracket will be installed at 45 3/4. So we'll mark that. And we'll position our brackets. So again, we're going to position them, we're going to be fitting them down over top of the bolts. In fact, what I'm going to do here is give myself a little cross line so that I can orient the brackets correctly. So basically where we have the crosshairs is where I'm going to put the outside hole of each bracket, and then just make sure that the other hole of the bracket is also on my reference line. Everything looks to be in good place, so we can go ahead and put our screws in. Make sure you check the diagrams for orientation, especially of these 2 brackets. If these brackets are installed upside down, you won't be able to put the panel onto the appliance door. So I want to try and get this one, make sure it's nicely squared up because it is a threaded bracket, and the adjustment bolts that go on the appliance door will have to thread into it nice and straight. You know, depending on the material that these panels are made out of, you may want to pre-mark or pre-drill your holes, taking care that your drill bit doesn't go all the way through the panel, of course. And that's all the brackets in place. It's time to mount the handle on the panel now, so I've flipped the panel around because I want to continue to work on this side. And if I look at my references here that I've wrote on here, this is now my top, and my handle is on this side. So it's a left-hand hinged unit, so we're going to put the handle on the right-hand side, which will be down this edge. And we'll want to make sure that the edge is off the side of the table for when we drill any holes. So we're going to mark a center point on the panel. The panel is 54 3/4, so we're going to go to 27 3/8 as our center point. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll reference off that our holes for our handle. Also in the installation manual, it'll tell you the distance between the handles. The vertical handle, which is an HV handle, tells me that the spacing between the offsets is 35.5 inches. And so I'm going to go half of that. There's my 35.5. So it's going to be 17 3/4 off of that center line that I made for each hole that we're going to drill. Okay, I've marked my distance from center point for the vertical placement of the handle. Now I want to make sure that it's centered actually on this frame. And that's a 2.5 inch frame that goes around there. So we'll place the handle in the middle of that around 1.25 inches. So that's going to be right about there. And we don't have to worry about making too many marks here because the handle standoffs will cover it all. And we'll do the same thing here, 1.25 in, right there. And that's where we'll drill through. We're going to use a 3/16 inch drill bit, just as long as your drill bit is actually wider than the screw that's going to be passing through the panel. And just one final check before we drill. We want to make sure that the holes are going to be in the right spot, which they are. Now, Fhiaba uses the same handles for both of their stainless steel front models and they're fully integrated, so the same handles will be supplied when you order them for the fully integrated. But they also come with this additional hardware for the kit. So when these are mounted on a stainless unit, they're actually using these set screws to mount to studs that are on the front, in which case we don't need those for the fully integrated. So what we have to do is actually remove the standoffs from the handle. And we should probably do it not on the panel. So, a couple of Phillips screws. That thread the standoffs into the handle, so we don't need these screws anymore. And we'll actually remove these set screws as well because we won't need those. You need a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench to remove those, or Allen key. And the other one. And orient the set screw holes in such a manner that they won't be visible to the customer. So the top one facing up, the bottom one facing down. And screw and washer goes through the back of the panel. Standoff with hole oriented down, and then handle. And so we're basically threading in to the handle, through the panel, and through the standoff. Do the same thing up top. And then we'll tighten those into place. And now the panel is ready to be mounted.